He never meant to be a hero, he just happened to be looking out his kitchen window at 3 in the morning. The world is asleep, draped in a silence so profound that the crunch of gravel under a single-car ES tires sounds like a minor explosion. In a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, this is the kind of anomaly that pulls a man like Harold from his midnight glass of water to the window. He saw the sedan, nondescript and dark, pause at the curb. He saw the door open, and the single, large bundle that was pushed out, tumbling down the grassy embankment that led to the creek below. He saw the car door slam shut, the red taillights retreating into the night, and then the silence returned. Harold stood there for a long moment, the cold from the window pane seeping into his fingertips, a single, chilling thought crystallizing in his mind. He had just witnessed a murder. Her name was Lila Vance, and to the world she was a ghost a week before her body was found. A 28-year-old graphic designer with a laugh that could disarm a room, Lila was the kind of person who curated happiness. Her Instagram feed was a mosaic of golden hour selfies, intricate latte art, and hiking trails that promised serenity. But behind the curated squares was a woman navigating the treacherous waters of a relationship that had turned from a fairy tale into a cage. Her partner, Michael Thorpe, was a man who presented as a pillar of the community, a mid-level architect with a firm handshake and a donation to every local charity auction. He was charming, ambitious, and in possession of a temper that Lila had only begun to confide in her closest friend, Sarah, in hushed, fearful tones over coffee. "He has these eyes," she'd whispered once, her own usually vibrant eyes clouded with dread. "When he gets angry, they just go flat, like there's no one home." The investigation began not with Harold's call, but with Sarah's, 48 hours after Lila failed to show up for their weekly brunch, a ritual so sacred that a missed text was a 5-alarm fire. The police, initially treating it as a low-priority missing persons case, found an apartment that was a stage set for a normal life, with one backstage detail out of place, a single shattered ceramic mug lying in a pile of dust and shards near the kitchen trash meticulously swept up but not yet discarded. Detective Miller, a man with a face like a worn-out topographical map and a gut feeling that had solved more cases than forensic science, noted it. He noted everything. The way Michael Thorpe answered the door, his grief looking practiced, his answers a little too polished. "We had a fight," Michael admitted, his voice a masterclass in contrite sadness. "About the wedding. She wanted to elope. I wanted a big party. It was stupid. She left, said she needed air. I thought she was going to Sarah's." But the story began to fray at the edges. There was no activity on her credit cards. Her phone, a digital tether to her life, had gone dead near the apartment. And then Harold called, and the investigation pivoted from a missing persons case to a homicide. Lila's body was found at the bottom of the creek embankment, wrapped in a cheap, generic tarpaulin. The cause of death was not the fall, but blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a heavy, rounded object. The murder weapon was never found, but the absence of evidence became its own kind of presence. Miller's team tore Michael Thorpe's life apart. They found receipts for the tarpaulin, purchased with cash at a hardware store 12 miles from his home. They found a car wash receipt from the early hours of the morning. Lila disappeared. A frantic, detailed cleaning of his sedan's interior. The case, built on a foundation of circumstantial evidence and a powerful motive, was looking like a textbook domestic homicide. The district attorney, confident and eager, prepared for what seemed like an open and shut trial. The courtroom was a theater of polished wood and suppressed tension. Michael Thorpe sat at the defense table, his posture a sculpture of wronged innocence. The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision. The fight, the financial control, the witness who saw him buying the tarp, the obsessive cleaning of his car. It was a narrative of premeditated rage, of a man who could not stand to lose control and thus decided to erase the problem. The defense, however, did not try to dismantle this timeline. Instead, they offered a new one, a narrative so shocking in its banality that it sucked the air from the room. Their star witness was not an alibi, but a psychologist who testified to Michael's state of mind. And then Michael himself took the stand. Under the gentle guidance of his lawyer, he told a different story, a story of an accident. He admitted to the fight. He admitted it was violent, that he had thrown the mug, the same one found shattered against the wall in a blind fury. He admitted that Lila, terrified, had fled from the kitchen into the living room, and that he had followed screaming, his vision clouded with red. "I just wanted her to listen," he pleaded, his voice cracking with what sounded like genuine anguish. "I reached for her arm, to spin her around, to make her understand. And she slipped. Her feet went out from under her on the polished floor. She fell backwards, and her head. It hit the corner of the marble coffee table. There was a sound. A terrible, wet crack." He described the moment of horrifying clarity, the blood pooling on the white rug, the frantic, useless attempts to find a pulse. She was gone. Just like that. It was an accident. A terrible, stupid, tragic accident. This was the defense's masterstroke. They weren't arguing he didn't do it. They were arguing he didn't mean to. The panic that followed the disposal of the body, the lies, all of it was reframed not as the actions of a cold-blooded killer, but of a terrified man, a coward who saw his entire life crumbling over a single irreversible moment of bad luck. The narrative was insidious. It was human. Who among the jurors hadn't, in a moment of rage, done something they instantly regretted? The stakes of the trial shifted dramatically. This was no longer about murder one, about malice aforethought. It was about manslaughter. It was about a few years in a low-security prison versus a life sentence. The prosecution was reeling. The story of the controlling, murderous fiancé was being replaced by the story of the devastated, clumsy man who made one fatal mistake. Detective Miller, watching from the gallery, felt a cold fury building in his chest. The story was too neat, the emotion too perfect. The description of the fall, the angle of impact, it was all just a little too clinically accurate. He went back to the evidence locker that night, the hum of the fluorescent lights his only company. He laid out the photographs of Lila's apartment, the ones taken before the cleanup. The shattered mug was in the kitchen. The blood was in the living room, a shocking, vibrant crimson against the cream-colored rug, centered around the sharp, unforgiving corner of the coffee table. He stared at the spatial relationship between the two rooms, at the trajectory of the hypothetical fall. And then he saw it, the thing that everyone had missed because it was too obvious, too simple. The coffee table corner was stained with Lila's blood, yes, but it was also chipped. A small, almost imperceptible fleck of white marble was missing, and that fleck, it wasn't on the rug. It wasn't anywhere in the immediate vicinity. He obtained a search warrant for Michael's car, the one that had been so meticulously cleaned. The forensics team took it apart, not looking for blood, but for something else. And in the seam of the trunk, wedged in a place that a hasty, panicked cleaning might miss, they found it. A tiny, almost microscopic shard of white marble. The climax of the trial came not with a witness, but with an object. The prosecution recalled their forensics expert and presented the new evidence. The marble shard from the trunk was a perfect mineralogical match to the chipped corner of Michael Thorpe's coffee table. The defense's story of a panicked, accidental death and a subsequent cover-up began to collapse under the weight of this single, damning detail. Because if Lila had died from an accidental fall in the living room, why was a piece of the murder weapon found in the trunk of the car used to transport her body? The only logical conclusion was that the coffee table was not the scene of the accident, but the murder weapon itself. That Michael had not reached for her in a fit of passion, but had, in a calculated act of rage, driven her head into its unyielding corner. The accident was a lie. The panic was a performance. The flat, dead eyes Lila had described to her friend were the true window into his soul. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict was guilty of murder in the first degree. As the judge read the sentence, Michael Thorpe's mask of contrition finally slipped, and for a single, fleeting second, the flat, cold emptiness that Lila had seen stared out at the courtroom, a chilling glimpse of the truth before the shutters came down again. Harold, the accidental witness, watched from the back of the room, feeling not vindication, but a profound, weary sadness. He had seen the end of the story before anyone even knew it had begun. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who plan their evil in shadowy corners, but the ones who hide it in plain sight, wrapped in the respectable skin of an everyday life, waiting for a single, uncontainable moment of rage to reveal the abyss within. The most convincing lies are the ones we tell ourselves to survive the truth. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.